Sup Internet Wanderer, let me ask you a question. Do you live under a Dwayne Johnson? If not, then I assume you've played an FPS shooter in the last 10 years. And yes, I realize that means shooter. Then I assume you know of two legendary games, TF2 and Counter-Strike. All modern popular FPS games get updates and balance patches. Because, actively played games need the gameplay to be shaped up to keep things interesting. These are live service games, after all. Well, at least the games with people actually playing in them. So with that said, I posit the question, why is it that two of Valve's biggest multiplayer first-person shooter games, with hundreds of thousands and even millions of players, seemingly don't get any meaningful gameplay changes? So, if you'll allow me, Internet Wanderer, I want to get into the reasons as to why these pillars of gaming are the way that they are. Why do they never change? And perhaps, I guess a more pressing question is, there might be nothing wrong with staying the same. After all, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But in my opinion, some change would be nice. Valve might decide to do something wacky. Could be in the future, these never-changing games might not stay so static. We can only hope.
This is
the heavy update.
Dear God. There's more. No.
What's up, Internet Wanderer? I'm RGOnax. I make videos that don't matter. If you enjoy the video, do the YouTube things, and big thanks to the channel members. Before I start yapping out of my ass, I gotta give a disclaimer. I am not good at either of these games. I play TF2 more than I do Counter-Strike. On top of that, I watch several dozen TF2 YouTubers, one of the favorite genres of which is where they talk about TF2's balance, and they propose hypothetical updates to the game. But nevertheless, I am far from good at playing TF2.
I hurt people.
And even more so when it comes to Counter-Strike. I have been playing on and off since the 1.6 days. In fact, I remember having Counter-Strike source lobbies 12v12 with a bunch of my classmates in computer cafes after school. Those were great memories. All of our in-game names were each other's moms. Yeah, I think this is where my obsession with your mom jokes probably started. So forgive me if I talk about these two games and I feel a little noobish when I talk about them, because I am not good at either of them. But I still have quite a few hours in them, and I think that I have some interesting things to say. Or maybe this video is just a way for me to cope after my more serious Counter-Strike friends flamed me for buying a Galil instead of an AK.
Buys on a baby.
I bought a Galil because it has a stat track, and I want to add numbers to this stat track.
That's a really good strategic move right there, where I'm gonna give you a good commendation. I'm gonna commend rep your profile.
Thank you.
Essentially what I'm saying is, while I might not have thousands of hours in either TF2 or Counter-Strike, that doesn't mean that my opinions are invalid. I've put hundreds of hours in both games, and I'm a non-FPS player. However, I am no stranger to hyper-competitive, actively balanced games, which is something TF2 players can't exactly claim they have either of. I'm sorry, TF2 community, but goddamn.
You, stop right where you are. That is an order. He's getting away. Do not let him get to the rip. Don't do it, pal. Do not do it.
Now, before I really can get into the meat of this topic, I need to discuss a topic about games and their balancing design. It's a specific way on how games can categorize their way of balance. That is, if a game's balance is tight or loose. Don't laugh. Do you have any idea how much willpower it took me not to make a your mom joke here? Be grateful. Everything that I'm showing here on screen is a massive oversimplification, and all games have both elements to some degree, but always favoring one side over the other. So I hope you kind of get the gist of what I'm trying to say here. When I was trying to look up more information about these terms, it turns out that categorizing games as tight or loose is more common when it comes to fighting games. Which, by the way, if you're enjoying the snappy editing of this video, I also made a video about a year ago in a similar style covering the fighting games that I grew up with. Seamless segue aside, Counter-Strike is a rigid game by design, and the Counter-Strike community, for the most part, doesn't want the game to change. Team Fortress 2 is a relatively looser game, and its community, for the most part, is rather casual, and wants the game, at the very least, to get new updates. How exactly is Counter-Strike rigid and TF2 loose? Okay, I'm gonna give you a simplified example. In Counter-Strike, mechanically, the things you have to worry about are things like the map, you gotta memorize the grenade throw spots, worrying about possible enemy sightline locations, strategize with your team on which direction to roll out on, and whether or not any of you should act as distractions or flank the enemy. You gotta know the equipment of your 4 teammates, and you have to try to know what the equipment is of your 5 enemies. You gotta know the mechanics and spray patterns of every gun. You gotta make sure your aim is on point because there's friendly fire.
Fucking perfect flash, I mean.
You gotta track the enemy's economy while maintaining your own. Time management to make sure that you have enough time to attack or defend, depending if you're a terrorist or counter-terrorist and of the game mode that you're currently playing. There's definitely a lot more, but this is just the stuff that I can think of off the top of my head. Whereas TF2, barring a few exceptions, has most of these mechanics as well, but with many more mechanics layered on top of them. The 9 unique classes all have different mechanics, attributes, hitboxes, and even weight. TF2 easily surpasses the number of weapons that Counter-Strike has. Even if you take away all of the reskins and straight up bottom tier weapons that TF2 has, or meme weapons I guess, I would still say that TF2 has more than double the amount of viable weapons that Counter-Strike has. And that's also not mentioning that pubs in TF2 are 12v12. And even if you want to choose the more niche competitive game modes of TF2, it's either gonna be 9v9 or 6v6. Counter-Strike is only 5v5. There is far less to keep track of, compared to the 24-player lobbies that Team Fortress 2 has, even if some of those 24 players aren't necessarily, playing. I've mentioned before that I'm not much of an FPS player, but whenever you play Team Fortress 2, you have to do the worst thing an FPS can ask of its players. Sometimes you have to look up.
Dominated, hippie, get a job!
You know, I'm something of
Soldier!
myself.
And lastly, you might be surprised to hear that the base jumper is entirely viable on certain maps. Look at this little guy, he has no idea what's going on, how could he? Yeah, I'm convinced. This is basically the end game of TF2. There's nothing that counters it. All hope is lost.
I sincerely apologize if I got anything wrong when I was comparing TF2 and Counter-Strike. If I truly did miss something or I got something wrong, that's a result of my ignorance, and I really don't mean to paint either game in a bad light. But I hope you kinda get my point. I'm not trying to say Counter-Strike is brain-dead simple or easy compared to Team Fortress, or that Team Fortress is a pure RNG, no-skill game. Not at all. Both of these games are some of the most tactical and mechanically deep games you can find out there. But it's still clear to see that both of them lean one way or the other. I guess a more simplified way of putting it is basically the tighter the game, the less random bullshit is happening at any given point. And the most simplified way that I can describe it is like rock, paper, scissors is a pretty tight game. Suddenly throw in a reptile and a Star Trek character, and then suddenly this game got a whole lot looser. Which is also how I can describe your mother last night.
Keep getting away with it!
Fucking got him, man. God damn. I won't get into it, but for my MOBA players in the audience, another good comparison would be Dota versus League. But that's a can of worms I'll open up on another day. Both Team Fortress 2 and Counter-Strike technically are live service games, despite existing far before the term became mainstream. Even though, food for thought, is TF2 really a live service game? It's been almost 10 years since its last major update. Sure, Valve maintains the servers and they add good quality of life updates every now and then, but it's rather telling that in the last few years, the biggest thing TF2 got was a player boss mode, kinda like Evolve, but far worse because Australians are far scarier than any monster.
I did my MMA around the head. Tackle! And that's it, hang on.
And I guess they did a small bug fix to one of the worst weapons in the game, so, you know, feeling blessed. I'm partially joking. TF2 is still a live service game, even though most players, myself included, never ever want to hear these legacy games described as live service. Even though they are. Okay, I'll give a more specific example. I'll delve into Counter-Strike for a little bit. From my understanding, the Counter-Strike meta is dictated by a trinity of top dog weapons. Those are the M4 and the other M4, the AK and the AWP, and all other weapons are balanced relative to these three. Many weapons in the game are used as economy options in order to facilitate the player getting one of these three guns faster, and some other options, like the scoped rifles, are usually seen as a luxury choice by those normies who still want the option to aim down the sights, like me. So in that sense, all the other weapons in Counter-Strike exist to prop up the three meta choices. However, that being said, there is one category of weapon that has been around since the beginning of the franchise, and these types of weapons has always been treated as a joke. I'm talking about the machine guns. Now, I'm no Counter-Strike historian. I've never properly read a Counter-Strike patch note in my life, but almost everyone agrees that the machine guns at no point in Counter-Strike's history were ever considered good. Somewhat related to this, when I was writing this script, an article was released asking Gooseman, the co-founder of Counter-Strike, why he stopped working with Valve and the franchise. TLDR, he wanted to shake up the game's balance a little more, but the community literally would not let him. He felt like his creativity was being limited by the balance culture of the game that he helped create. In other words, he wanted to introduce more game-changing patches, however, the Counter-Strike community thought otherwise. Fun fact, around the early 2000s, he was actually working on the original Counter-Strike 2, but unfortunately his little project never got off the ground and we got the real Counter-Strike 2 almost 2 decades later. So, Gooseman left in 2006 and has been working in various other game companies since then. I'll be generous and say that his different projects have had varying success. As it stands right now, modern Counter-Strike doesn't change much, so it's rather notable when it does. And most of those big changes occur whenever there's a gigantic update or a brand new Counter-Strike game altogether. Case in point, when they transitioned from Counter-Strike Global Offensive to Counter-Strike 2, in all honesty, when they added the dynamic smoke physics to the game, I was literally blown away. I'm sure other games have tried to implement smoke physics like this, but never to a competitive game and never so convincingly done like this. I don't know if the Counter-Strike 2 community sees this smoke change as a good thing or a bad thing, but as a person who's not super involved in the competitive scene of Counter-Strike, it's just a really, really cool feature. On top of that, the Source 2 visual upgrades are just amazing. Like the water physics, delicious. But shifting focus back to the machine guns, I don't really think a lot of people will argue with the statement that machine guns have always been kinda trash. Maybe they might have been meta for like 1 or 2 patches, I don't know, 10 years ago, but for 95% of their existence, maybe even 99% of their existence, they have been garbage. However, I'll give Counter-Strike Global Offensive this. When they made the Negev, the second machine gun ever added to Counter-Strike, I'm not counting machine guns from that spin-off which shall not be named, the Negev became dirt cheap, essentially cosplaying as a laser cannon. It holds corners very well, and when I saw the price drop, I was personally very happy. This is actually the time when I played Counter-Strike the most, in fact, or at least playing in the competitive game mode. I have a stat track on my Negev, and I made sure that all of the kills that I got from this thing was from competitive matches. And again, I really need to stress this again in the video, I seldomly play Counter-Strike. And the vast majority of the kills on this stat track was from 2018 and maybe up until 2020. Doesn't matter though, this thing is still considered a hyper niche weapon and people will flame you if you use it for more than 1 round, at best. Take a look, this poor guy's eyes are being punished for the crime of holding a corner with a machine gun. What is the charge? Enjoying a machine gun? A succulent meme machine gun? Get your hands off my pig! It's a shame that the guns in Counter-Strike are bad. It feels almost illegal to make machine guns in a video game bad, doesn't it?
It's a machine gun! Machine gun!
Between you and me, I don't personally care that the machine guns aren't meta, or even good, but the main point is, they're goddamn fun.
Hey? I'm going. There's an absolute madman holding stairs right now. You like that smoke?
Own it.
Shove it up your asshole and then pull the trigger every now and then. Make it vibrate. Oh, I kill a guy in the background.
puppy.
Alright, that's enough. At the very least, the Negev is actually somewhat usable in super specific scenarios, whereas the other machine gun, the original machine gun, the M249, is the most expensive gun in the game. More so than an AWP or even the auto snipers. And guess what? It is dog shit. Using this thing is actual cock and ball torture. God damn it, I beeped out the wrong words. Fuck. Sorry, I keep losing focus. It's a sign of my growing dementia. Hey, do you want to see a literal sign of why Counter-Strike almost never changes in any meaningful way? This is the game's logo back in the Counter-Strike Global Offensive days. Pay close attention to the gun that the guy is holding in the logo. Yeah, that's a SCAR rifle. And yes, I realize that means rifle. This gun does not exist in Counter-Strike. At least the older Counter-Strike logos actually had a gun that was in the game. They've updated the logo to the current one that they're using now, and it's a lot more blocky, and maybe if you squint your eyes really hard, you might be able to see that as an M4, but I still think that's a SCAR rifle, and I will not be convinced otherwise. Alright, I think I've talked about Counter-Strike enough. Let's move on to TF2. With Valve's other first-person shooter, it's a rather bittersweet and straightforward story when it comes to Team Fortress 2. Simply put, in Valve's eyes, TF2 has lived its life. The game has been around since 2007, and it got regular updates up until Jungle Inferno, which was released in 2017. That was 10 years of active development. I'm not saying it was all good or perfect, but it was development nonetheless. And now, all of this would be fine if Jungle Inferno left TF2 in a relatively balanced state, but that's just the thing. It didn't. There are so many bottom-of-the-barrel weapons in the game right now. And, hot take warning? Well, not really, depending on who you are. Some of the classes in the game are objectively worse than others. In this case, the Spy.
Anything Spy can do, Sniper does better. Sniper does everything better than Spy.
No, he can't.
Yes, he can.
No, he can't.
Yes, he can.
No, he can't.
Yes, he can. Yes, he can. Anything Spy can kill, Sniper kills faster, all without dying right after it too.
No, he can't.
Yes, he can.
No, he can't.
Yes, he can.
No, he can't.
Yes, he can. Yes, he can.
Now, I'll just say, I think Spy is really fun. I play him quite often. But it is of the opinion of the more competitive and seasoned players that Spy is objectively the worst class. I'm not saying you shouldn't play him, but that's what they say. The common consensus with TF2's balanced direction is that the game was built up to be a casual game. But in my opinion, I somewhat disagree. It's true that TF2 is a loose game, but just because a game is loose doesn't mean it has to be casual. Just take a look at Dota 2 for example. Dota 2 has so many variables and random bullshit going on at any given moment, but I don't think anybody in their right minds would say that Dota 2 is a casual game. Now, the reason why I think Team Fortress 2 nowadays has the overwhelming perception of being a casual game is due to the fact that, in my opinion, Valve has fumbled any and all attempts at serious competitive game modes. They made an entire update about it, and from what I've heard, people like to consider the Meet Your Match update to be one of the worst things that has ever happened to the game. It's not just because the game is cartoony or doesn't take itself seriously that people can't have a meaningful competitive experience. For example, Overwatch had a thriving competitive scene, well, at least for a while. And I truly believe that just because of Valve's, I guess, incompetence when it came to handling Team Fortress 2 is the real reason why most players don't want to bother taking this game seriously. There's entire sub-communities in Team Fortress 2 all about the competitive scene, but it's very clear that normal TF2 and competitive TF2 are very, very different. They even operate with different rules and regulations. The most popular competitive ways that you can play Team Fortress 2 is through Highlander or more popular Sixes, and let's just say these two games are night and day. That being said, the people who actually care about this sort of thing is still an extremely small sub-community. For all intents and purposes, competitive TF2 is a self-governing entity. They make up their own rules and they decide what goes and what doesn't. So while the vast majority of people wouldn't really care if Valve tried to make Team Fortress 2 competitively viable, I can at least definitively say what all TF2 players want is a brand new update. A big one, a major one, kinda like Jungle Inferno. And the thing is, I just don't think it's going to happen anymore, or at least not in any conventional sense. But let's sip some of that copium real quick. Barring a brand new Team Fortress game altogether, maybe just maybe, Valve has it in them to make one more big update for Team Fortress 2. Let's call it the hypothetical final update. And regardless if they make this hypothetical update or not, the problems of patch staleness will still persist after a while. Let's say in this final update, it makes changes to all the weapons and even systematic changes to the classes in the game. Eventually, the meta is going to be figured out and tier lists are going to be made, and there's going to be a clear distinction between what is strong and what isn't. Sure, let's say that they nerf the scorch shot to the ground. Okay, but then they buffed the man melter and now it's the top dog, and after a while, instead of bitching and moaning about the scorch shot, people are going to bitch and moan about the man melter. Hypothetically, of course, but you get my point. It's near impossible to make a competitively viable game without active support, and Valve hasn't touched the balance of this game in almost 10 years. So no matter what they do, no matter what they nerf or buff, it doesn't matter. The cycle of OP versus underpowered weapons and strategies will continue ever more. Maybe it's for that reason that some players don't want the game to change. They've been playing the same patch for almost a decade now, and people are comfy with the way things are. In a way, it's kinda beautiful. Team Fortress 2 legitimately is the only game that I can think of that has an entire etiquette when it comes to friendly players and friendly behavior as a whole. Seriously, what other game can you think of that has a kill bind etiquette? Or there's an entire silent understanding when a heavy approaches you with a sandwich out? Only loose games can facilitate a culture like that, and it's a beautiful thing to see. It's unfortunate that TF2 is in the state that it's currently in. Any other game company would be pumping out update after update, given Team Fortress 2's player numbers is still relatively high despite its age. But Valve is a business, and businesses need to make money. Steam already makes the vast majority of their profit. And then far in second place would be the two esports juggernauts that Valve has, Counter-Strike and Dota. And a far third place would be Team Fortress 2. Simply put, Valve makes a ton of money. And between them maintaining Steam, updates for Dota 2 and Counter-Strike, and any other hardware or software they got cooking in there, Team Fortress 2 just simply isn't worth their time. As sad as it is to hear, it's the truth. At least I think so. But that doesn't mean that Team Fortress 2 is done. Far from it. I mentioned earlier in the video that I watch a lot of TF2 YouTubers, despite TF2 not being my main game, but that doesn't matter to me. TF2 YouTuber content is some of my most consumed videos out there. I watch so much of their shit. It's amazing. You got videos out there with tens of millions of views. Animations, skits, guides, video essays, commentaries, shit posts.
Now!
It's an amazing thing. Counter-Strike, while being almost 10 times bigger than Team Fortress 2, cannot hold a candle to the TF2 YouTube catalog. It also doesn't help that 80% of Counter-Strike's YouTube content is seemingly related to skin casinos or gambling. Again, this is speaking to my ignorance. The passion in the Team Fortress 2 community is truly unparalleled. They legitimately will not let this game die. That being said, I don't want you to think of this video as some sort of doomer content. I don't want you to think that either of these games have nothing interesting in store for them in the future. Not at all. So I want to end this video with a little silver lining for these games. Counter-Strike Global Offensive was almost universally hated when it came out. Many people saw it as a pointless sequel or spin-off. It had a low player count and bad reputation. But as time went on, it eventually became the definitive Counter-Strike game for the vast majority of its player base. Now, Counter-Strike 2 already has the player numbers. It just needs to boost its reputation a little bit, that's all. And when it comes to Team Fortress 2, as far as I can see, Valve's involvement with this game is kinda done. Development-wise, that is. However, there are still things to look forward to. The 20-year anniversary is only 2 years away, and I bet my left nutsack that Valve is gonna do something big when that time comes. And I know they definitely will. Just look at what they did for the Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2 anniversaries. Whether this means there's going to be a big update to look forward to, or maybe Valve is going to allow the community to freely do whatever they want with the game, or maybe, just maybe, a brand new game altogether. We can only hope. Thanks for watching, Internet Wanderer. Do the YouTube things.